The early morning sun poured through the glass walls of Seattle's Lumen Field terminal as passengers boarded Allura Air Flight 3021. Among them was Dominic Hayes, the quiet force behind the airline co-founder and a man whose influence stretched far beyond the cabin walls. Today, he wasn't here as a CEO, but as a passenger ready to claim what was his. When Dominic reached seat 1E, he found it taken, occupied by Karen Whitmore, sprawled across two seats, shielded by a designer blanket. "This isn't your seat," Dominic said calmly, holding up his boarding pass. Karen shot him a sharp look, her voice dripping with entitlement. "I paid for this space. You're in the wrong place." Dominic didn't flinch. "I have the right to sit here. Please move." Hush fell over first class. Phones discreetly came up, recording every second of the silent standoff. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about respect, power, justice. What happens when a man who controls the skies refuses to give way to privilege? Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to Real Life Stories New, because some battles change everything without a single raised voice. The hush that fell after Dominic's words was anything but peaceful. It was thick with judgment and a barely contained sense of anticipation. Every pair of eyes in first class watched for what would happen next. Karen adjusted her blanket, still sprawled across both seats as if daring anyone to challenge her. The flight attendant, Chloe Grant, approached, her professional smile faltering as she glanced at Dominic's boarding pass. "Ma'am, I need to confirm your seat assignment," Chloe said quietly. Karen gave a theatrical sigh, waving her hand. "I already explained I need both for medical reasons. He can sit in the back. I know people in corporate." Dominic's face remained calm, but his eyes narrowed just enough to signal this was more than a minor inconvenience. A passenger, too, rose back, whispered to his seatmate, "Isn't that Dominic Hayes?" The murmurs grew, but Karen didn't seem to notice or she didn't care. Chloe's voice softened. "Mr. Hayes has a confirmed ticket for 1E. Karen's smile hardened. "Then I want to speak to your manager right now." Marcus Line, the purser, stepped in. His expression was carefully neutral. "Ma'am, we'll review the manifest. In the meantime, could you please let Mr. Hayes have his seat?" Karen's eyes flashed. "I don't feel safe. You see the way he's looking at me. This is harassment. You're all responsible if something happens." A wave of discomfort rolled through the cabin. The sense of injustice was palpable, yet so was the risk. Would anyone else speak up? The passengers' faces reflected their own inner conflicts. Empathy, embarrassment, fear of getting involved. Dominic didn't react to the accusation. He stepped back, choosing silence over escalation, but his stillness only drew more attention. Outside, the morning sun had fully risen. Its light glinted off the fuselage and spilled across the faces inside, illuminating not just luxury, but the lines between entitlement and principle. The captain's voice broke through on the intercom, explaining a brief systems delay. Everyone knew better. Chloe and Marcus huddled near the galley, their words hushed and urgent. "She's not moving," Marcus whispered. "But he's the CEO. If we push her, it could get ugly on social media." Chloe shook her head. "We're already trending. Someone's live streaming this. We can't just let her take his seat." Another flight attendant, Tom, leaned in. "Passengers are already talking. If we side with her, it's going to explode." Chloe met Marcus's eyes. "What do we stand for if we cave now?" Back in the cabin, Karen shifted, feeling the weight of eyes on her. "You all think you're so progressive," she muttered loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "But you're just bullies with badges." A man across the aisle, a venture capitalist who'd been pretending to work on his laptop, closed it. "Ma'am, You're the only one making this difficult. Karen shot him a look of pure venom. Mind your business. The tension escalated further when the cabin doors stayed shut. No push back. Passengers started to whisper more openly. Some looked at Dominic with growing recognition, some with sympathy, some with suspicion. Chloe returned, this time with a message straight from corporate. Her voice was firmer. "Ma'am, we need you in your assigned seat. Mr. Hayes, you are welcome to sit in 1E as purchased." Karen's hands tightened around her blanket. Her voice rose. "This is discrimination. I'll call my attorney. I'll have your jobs." Dominic spoke softly, but every word landed like a stone in still water. "Everyone here has a job to do, including you. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Her jaw clenched. "You don't scare me. You're just another man in a suit." He didn't reply. The silence between them felt electric. Outside, ground staff exchanged glances. Word had spread. No one wanted to make the wrong move. Suddenly, Karen stood facing the other passengers. "You're all witnesses. I'm being targeted for no reason except that I asked for a little comfort. This man is intimidating me. I don't feel safe." A middle-aged woman in row 3 shook her head. "We all watched you refuse to move your blanket. Ma'am, it's not about comfort. It's about what's fair." Another passenger, a young black woman in business attire, raised her voice just enough. "People like us know what it's like to be asked to move for someone else's convenience." Karen ignored them. She turned to Chloe. "Either you move him, or I'll make sure the world hears about this." Chloe drew a slow breath. "The world already is, ma'am." Minutes ticked by. The entire flight was on hold. No one could board. No one could leave. The delay clock grew longer. 15, then 20, then 30 minutes. At the gate, executives from Allura's parent company began to arrive. Brian Okoro, VP of Corporate Risk, entered quietly and nodded to Dominic. He didn't introduce himself to Karen. Dominic rose, meeting Brian's eyes. No words passed, but the understanding was clear. Authority had arrived, and not on Karen's side. Brian spoke with Marcus and Chloe at the galley. "This goes above our pay grade now. Board's watching. We don't cave to threats or viral clips. Our dignity policy stands." Back in first class, Karen's bravado started to crack. She clutched her phone, trying to call out, but there was no signal. The Wi-Fi, too, seemed to fail at just the wrong moment. Dominic sat again, quiet and still around him. The energy in the cabin changed. People who had been silent now felt the tide turning. The man who had been challenged was also the man whose name held power. Karen's voice, now tinged with desperation, cut the silence. "What are you trying to prove? That you're better than everyone? That you can buy your way out of anything?" He finally looked at her, eyes steady. "I'm not proving anything. I'm just asking for what's right." The words hit their mark. Karen's face wrined, her lips pressed into a thin, angry line. She began muttering under her breath, loud enough for only the nearest few to hear. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." The announcement finally came over the intercom. The flight would remain grounded until further notice, pending review from corporate. Passengers groaned, but no one left their seats. A lawyer in row 2 began writing notes for what would become a viral social media thread. Others took to Twitter, # spinning, # flight dignity, and who is Dominic Hayes. In the cockpit, the captain received the latest directive: do not proceed until Dominic Hayes gave the signal. The chain of command had shifted. At last, Karen stood again, shoulders squared, and stormed toward the galley. "I want off this plane. You can't keep me here." Brian blocked her path gently but firmly. Ma'am, you are not being detained, but for security and safety, no one is allowed to deplane until this situation is resolved. Her mask of entitlement slipped. You'll hear from my lawyers. I'll ruin you. Dominic's voice, low and even, stopped her. You're welcome to try, but everything is being recorded. Every word. The cabin watched, transfixed. No one spoke. The spectacle wasn't the outburst. It was the fact that for once power wasn't on the side of arrogance. Then quietly, Chloe stepped forward and addressed the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. In accordance with our passenger dignity policy, this flight will not depart until every customer is seated as assigned and treated with respect. That's our promise, not just to one person, but to everyone on board. There was a ripple of applause. Karen looked stunned. A little boy across the aisle stared at Dominic with wide eyes. Are you the boss of the plane? He whispered. Dominic smiled for the first time that morning. Not today. I'm just another passenger. The new crew arrived, handpicked by corporate for professionalism. Chloe, now visibly relieved, led them down the aisle. Karen tried to reassert herself. This isn't fair. You're all letting him win. But her words fell flat. Passengers now openly challenged her. You tried to take his seat. We all saw it, said a man in a blue blazer. A woman in business attire added, You made everyone late. Not him. The cameras kept rolling. The story was out. Karen's legacy had changed in a single flight. The aircraft finally released, pushed back from the gate. As the engines hummed to life, Dominic settled into 1E. Karen, alone now in her seat, stared at the window, isolated, ignored, and exposed. During the flight, Dominic kept to himself. He read, checked work emails, and responded to a few notes from his team. Yet, the real conversation was happening online. Passengers posted videos, their words praising calm strength over arrogance. The hashtags climbed. Dig nig 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 flies first. Hash allure accountability, hat quiet power. Karen tried to rally support, but none came. Even the crew passed her by with polite indifference, serving others first. Her demands faded into background noise. At cruising altitude, Chloe stopped by Dominic's seat. Her voice was low, but full of genuine respect. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, not just for standing up for yourself, but for the rest of us, too. Dominic nodded. It's not about me. It's about what we let slide and what we choose to fix. Landing in New York, the media waited at the terminal. The incident had gone viral. Reporters pressed for comments, but Dominic simply walked through the airport like any other traveler, unbothered, unguarded. Karen, on the other hand, was met by security and quietly escorted away, not in handcuffs, but with every camera lens tracking her humiliation. Days later, the airline issued a public apology, not for Dominic, but for every passenger who'd ever felt lesser or unheard. Karen's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Her attempt to leverage privilege ended with her blacklisted from Allura Air and facing public backlash. She lost lawsuits, sponsorships, and the support she thought was guaranteed. Meanwhile, the airline implemented sweeping changes, mandatory dignity training, anonymous feedback lines, and a new policy requiring all incidents to be documented transparently. Dominic's quiet stand became a symbol across the industry. The last scene in this story doesn't belong to Dominic or Karen, but to a young woman flying alone a month later. She's assigned to first class. When a man tries to claim her seat, the crew steps in firm, fair, and unwavering. The world has changed, not through anger, but by refusing to accept less than respect. Because sometimes real power is quiet, and the seat you defend today can change the way everyone travels tomorrow. As the city lights of New York flickered below, Dominic gathered his belongings and stepped into the terminal, not as the silent force behind a corporation, but as a man changed by the stand he'd taken. For him, the lesson wasn't about winning or public recognition. It was about realizing how a single moment of resolve can ripple outward, shifting not just one person's fate, but the standard for everyone who comes after. Passengers whispered, some offered grateful nods, and even the crew carried themselves a little taller, as if dignity had finally found its voice among them. No announcement was needed. The real victory played out in the subtle ways people now looked at each other, with a little more respect, a little less fear. Days later, a young woman settled into first class, her ticket checked without question, her presence unchallenged. The change Dominic started lived on, quietly shaping what came next. Outside the window, a jet soared upward into the dawn, a reminder that every act of courage, no matter how quiet, can lift us all. If this story inspired you, help us share these real-life journeys. Like, share, and subscribe to Real Life Stories New, where every voice matters and every stand leaves a mark. Music,